Right, hello everybody. Welcome to number 3 of our series, our detailed talks. Great to see you. It was a fabulous discussion last week, which I hosted. The week before was also fabulous, which Christina hosted, and that was with Jedburgh Grammar Campus by Stalin Brand and the Forth Valley College by Weirkin Hall. That was great. That was education. Last week it was all about conservation, and we had a great conversation about conservation with about High Sutherland and Bodmin-on-Teith, and also at the Den by Technique and Design. And we had Paul Stalin with us again, and this time he was in the context of being the client. Now, this week, it's all about new built dwellings, and delighted to have 3 people, two people from Paper Igloo and one from Sonia Browse Architects, Sonia Browse herself. And also we've got like Vary Grant and Martin McRae from Paper Igloo. And they're both quite, I think they're both interesting, really interesting, fascinating projects, and I'll be interested to talk about them later on. So please all put in your Q&A into the box. Please ask as many questions as you can, and also use the chat bar. And each building will be talked about for approximately 20 minutes, after which we'll have a good conversation. We will run till about 6:45. And but first of all, we're going to hear from, I'll stop talking. And first of all, we're going to hear from Martin McRae from Paper Igloo, and who will pass over to Vary Grant. So I'm going to pass you straight over now, and hopefully all the technical stuff will work. I'll pass you over to Martin. So over to you, Martin, and off you go.
Okay, hopefully everyone can hear me. Just getting the technical bit done here. Okay. Hi everyone, thanks for coming along today. Thanks Chris for introducing us as well. I'm Martin, as Chris said, and I'm going to be giving you a brief overview of our first Passive House project, which is also our own home and from which we run our architecture practice. I'll describe the general principles of the project, and Vary will get into the detail later about the construction method and the monitoring. When we decided to build a house, we were living in Glasgow, and so we're looking for a plot within the central belt with an easy distance from both Edinburgh and Glasgow. We found our plot in the village of Kippen near Stirling, which is characterised by a spectacular view of the Trossachs to the north. The site lies within the village, but is out with the 2 conservation areas, and is situated down behind a row of houses that make the main street frontage on Frinty Road. The site was originally part of a long few associated with the house on the main street, and was one of 2 plots for sale. As we were looking for a south-facing site, the plot we found was facing the opposite direction to the hills, and instead addresses a wooded area to the south and an open field to the west, which is a protected area of outstanding natural beauty. There is also a small burn that winds its way in and out of our plot, with about 6-metre height difference between the top of the site and the bottom where the burn is. When we chose to build a new build house, we decided at the outset to achieve 2 key standards: Sustainability Gold in the technical standards and Passive House certification. We felt that these 2 standards complemented and supplemented each other, with the wide-ranging goal criteria from water saving to enhanced acoustics and space standards tying in well with the reduced operational energy and thermal comfort provided by the Passive House standard. We also categorically wanted to achieve Passive House certification, as we wanted all of the known benefits that the rigour of that quality assurance process gives you. We also had a third aspiration, and that was to use as many natural materials as possible, which we'll get into in more detail later. Our starting point for the building was this concept of a box within a box. The outer box is a rain screen of naturally weathered timber cladding with a visually ad hoc fenestration design, optimally orientated to take advantage of solar gains. At night, conceptually, the glazing design is reminiscent of light passing between the trees in the wooded area opposite. The inner box is conceived as a tactile sculptural form that's present in every space. It contains all of the wet services, circulation and hidden storage, and also serves the other primary rooms. We then live in the space between these inner and outer boxes. In terms of site layout, the 2-storey building is positioned at the top of the site, at the highest point, to maximise the views over the field from the upper storey, to minimise the shading impact of the wooded area to the south, and to prevent having to build on the slope. We orientated the cuboid due south, so there's this dynamic relationship between the building perimeter and the site boundaries, which creates interesting views both from within and back towards the building from the surrounding landscape. You enter the house in a smaller, more intimate space, but directly facing a glazed door to the garden on the opposite side of the building on the south elevation, which draws you through the darker hall, where you're enveloped in the darker wooden core, and then you emerge into a large double height space in the southwestern corner, which provides drama and interest and floods the space with light. This double height space and the window arrangement also allows the sunlight to penetrate quite far into the plan, which is 10.5 meters deep internally. The cross section shown here cuts through the master bedroom on the first floor, where we have an internal glazed screen between the room and the open plan double height dining area below, which adds another level of interaction between the spaces and gives a sense of playfulness to the house. We have a 1-degree flat roof to allow for the ceiling roof covering and a parapet which mostly conceals the renewables from view. Working from the initial starting point, which we have established by achieving sustainability gold, passive house and the use of natural materials, we developed 12 key aims to bring these standards and aspirations together, which you can see here. You can also see in this photo on the axonometric the articulation of the concept as it is in reality, with the core being the most prominent element in the house that is not only present in every room, but also helps to define the spaces as they wrap around it. Looking at the ground floor in more detail, we wanted to make a building that was laid out for maximum future flexibility and adaptability, as it will hopefully be here for a very long time after we leave it. Some of these aspects of sustainability gold required additional storage or space for things like bikes, prams, wheelchairs, which we incorporated into the layout. We also have a ground floor bedroom directly opposite the main accessible bathroom, which, as the doors to the two spaces are tucked away off the main hallway, it also doubles in effect as an ensuite when we have guests. Movement through the house is essentially from north to south, with the view I mentioned previously straight through to the garden as soon as you enter, but it's also possible to circulate around the central core in both directions, which creates a nice sense of fluidity to the ground floor plan. Upstairs, you can see the double height indicated in dark grey, and see the relationship between it and the master bedroom that we saw in the cross section earlier, as well as the home office in the southeastern corner, which thanks to a built-in bed element also serves as a fourth bedroom when we need it. Looking now a wee bit more into the construction method, to maximise thermal comfort, energy reduction and desire to build with natural materials, we decided to build a twin wall timber frame with a thermal break in the centre, and the entire wall build-up filled with hand-placed wood fibre bats. This consists of a 145mm timber stud in all of the single height areas and a 245mm stud frame in the double height areas, with a 60mm deep thermal break, and then a 95mm stud that extends uninterrupted the full height of the building. The two leaves are held together with plywood gussets. The insulated zone in this wall construction then fully connects to the insulation in the flat roof and the insulated raft foundation system under the slab, which is also our ground floor finish to minimise layers in the construction. We'll come back to the idea of minimising layers and materials later on. The warm side of the insulated envelope is then fitted with an airtight layer, which is indicated by the red line on the slide. This is formed by the slab at the ground floor, a board material to the walls, and a membrane to the underside of the flat roof ceiling and in the window reveals. We used a membrane to take advantage of its variable diffusion properties and allow for ease of installation at a couple of key positions, such as around the external face of the intermediate floor structure. The outside of this thermally continuous envelope is then fitted with a wind-tight layer, indicated by the blue line. This is mainly achieved by the use of tongue-and-grooved wood-fibre insulation boards, and some membrane and airtight tape used locally around window reveals and at the base of the wall to maximise protection of the wood fibre due to the open rain screen cladding. This project was a self-build in the true sense of the words. Vary and I built most of it ourselves, from laying the insulation formwork of the Raft foundation slab, me building the timber frame with two joiners, through to two of us doing almost all of the internal finishes, plumbing, tiling, floor laying, timber cladding, amongst other things. During the build, we kept a detailed online journal on our website of the whole process. We hope this resource would be useful to others who are also self-building. Sometimes it can be hard to find practical guidance online as to how to actually construct aspects like an airtight shell without having to rely on one particular manufacturer. We also participate in the Passive House Trust Open Days every year for 6 years to disseminate what we're learning and to learn from others who visited us. Now I'll hand you over to Vary and she'll talk you through the construction in a wee bit more detail.
Hi everyone. So starting from the bottom, we chose to use an insulated raft foundation system by Isoquick as it gives excellent thermal continuity with the wall above. It aids in eliminating the thermal bridge that often occurs at the perimeter of the ground floor wall and allowed us to simplify the excavations on site with our heavy clay subsoil. The formwork was laid over a long weekend by us and some architect friends that you can see here, and was really straightforward to assemble with interlocking perimeter modules and 2 layers of infill boards, which have an egg crate pattern on one side that locks the whole system together, eliminating the need for any shoring or support during the concrete pour. Our structural slab is also our finished surface throughout the ground floor, which reduces the need for an additional material or process, as it was simply power floated at the time of installation and then finished with a sealer hardener, making it water repellent. As we saw earlier, we stick built this twin wall timber frame in tabletop construction. In other words, ground floor frame first, then intermediate floor, then upper floor, roof, and finally parapet. These photos show the frame at various stages. The photos also illustrate some of the positions where we had to install the airtightness membrane during the frame erection, as we wouldn't be able to accommodate certain junctions later, for example, where the intermediate floor sits out over the inner part of the frame, and at the transition from double height walls with a thicker stud depth to the single height spaces. And finally, after about 12 weeks, we reached the roof. You can also see some of the 1,290 plywood gussets that went into these walls and some Styco wood fibre bats going into position into the parapet wall. We had to place these ones in earlier than the rest as there was an additional plywood racking board for wind resistance that went on the outer face of the inner frame, connecting the parapet back to the wall construction below. So this had to be done before the outer studs were extended past. On the outside of the frame, we used an external grade high density chipboard, which is extremely vapor open and which contains up to 80% recycled wood, called Populaire, made by Spano Girelis. This board has a Mews of 50, which makes it over 3 times more vapor diffusion open than conventional OSB. We then added a 100 mm thick layer of rigid Gutex wood fibre insulation, which we then extended over the timber part of the window frames to eliminate thermal bridging here. The cladding battens were fixed through this layer with both shear and suction screws, so we also had to accurately account for their impact on the U value, as there were quite a few of these. This kind of calculation, along with things like making an accurate timber fraction assessment, are typical of the additional rigour that Passivhaus requires, and which helped to eliminate the performance gap by assessing and accounting for any impactful items on the thermal performance. We specifically chose these board and insulation products for their moisture management properties, the fact that they are easy and safe to work with, and the fact that they contribute to the demountability of the construction, and they're also non-deleterious at their end of life. Internally, the airtight board we used was another Spano Girelis high-density chipboard, but this time with a factory-applied vapor control and airtight layer, and it's called Vapor Block. This just requires the joints to be taped to make it airtight, but as we were anxious because this was our first Passivhaus project, we also ended up taping over all of the screw holes. And as Martin mentioned earlier, we also used an airtight membrane, which was Intello Plus by Proclima in certain key locations. The exterior of the building was finished in an untreated large clad rain screen, fitted over a fine black insect netting, which we decided to do in the cladding on a 30-degree angle to add interest and a dynamic aspect to the elevations. We also wrapped the cladding into all of the reveals so that the exterior of the building took on this more sculptural appearance to provide contrast to the relatively static cuboid form. In total, we used 5.5 kilometres of large cladding on the exterior. We cut approximately 2,000 compound miters, and we used around 10,000 nails, which were all hand fixed just by the 2 of us, so it was quite an endeavour. The deep reveals to the windows and doors creates natural shading without additional devices, and a careful proportion of glazed opening on each elevation avoids overheating. We did discuss the lack of brise-soleil carefully with our Passivhaus certifier during the design phase, as our bedroom, which has a large west-facing window, represents the highest risk room for overheating. So we do have to actively engage with our purge ventilation strategy during prolonged hot periods, but as we have a roof light in our ensuite and an opening window in the bedroom, it's very straightforward. The high performance glazing also leads to lovely frost patterns on the outside of the glass in winter. The services strategies for this building are quite simple, which is as it should be in a Passivhaus. Everything wet is in the core, and the 3 main plant items, PV, solar thermal, and MVHR, are separated out into multiple smaller cupboards to put things in the best position for their specific requirements. So for example, the solar cylinder is in the centre of the plan to minimise pipe lengths, whereas the MVHR is on an external wall on the leeward side of the building. Grouping or stacking services is a common Passivhaus strategy that we adopt for all of our projects now. This house is also 100% direct electric, so we chose to do infrared space heating and not a heat pump due to the very low space heating demand and the fact that we had solar thermal covering most of our hot water needs. Solar thermal is very effective in both clear and diffuse conditions, and so it works really well in Scotland. We've been monitoring our heating to check against the predicted space heating demand from the PHPP, and these graphics show the on-off period from the infrared heating panels in the 3 principal rooms for a 3-month period. They're all individually thermostatically controlled, but as you can see, the intensity is directly linked to the temperature set, the amount of glazing in the space, the type of window or door frame, with the base of the kitchen patio doors being the weakest frame type, and the orientation of the room. The compact service core leads to maximum efficiency of pipe layouts to and from the centrally placed 300-litre hot water cylinder. And we have 2 solar thermal panels consisting of 24 evacuated tubes on the roof, which generates at least 64% of our hot water demand, and more when there's just 2 of us in the house. But we also have low flow fixtures and fittings throughout. We've also installed a vertical wastewater heat recovery unit below our most frequently used shower, which is in the master ensuite, which has a dynamic efficiency of about 54%. We followed the higher specification of acoustic performance set out in the Scottish Regulation Gold Standard to achieve 45 decibel separation for airborne noise between every space in the dwelling, including partitions around cupboards and so on. So to achieve this, we used wood fibre insulation between the joists, as it has such a good density, and a Fermacell system for the layers on either side of the intermediate floor. So this involved a double layered board with an integrated wood fibre layer on the bottom over the chipboard deck upstairs, and a double sheeted ceiling on resilient bars on the underside of the joists. We also strategically placed all of our services within a dropped service zone below the intermediate floor, so as to limit the number of penetrations we made through this enhanced acoustic system. And this altogether gives us really quiet, peaceful bedrooms, despite the open plan spaces and the double height. In terms of internal finishes, we didn't paint any of the exposed timber, but instead we stained it using Osmo stains, which are made with natural plant oils, and the walls and ceilings were all finished with low VOC paints to help maintain a good indoor air quality. We actually have a sprinkler system in the house, primarily due to the distance to the nearest hydrant, but this has allowed us to have a high proportion of exposed wood without the need for fire retardant surface treatments. We wanted to articulate this core in the centre of the house and to make sure it had a presence in every room, so we stained it black, as you can see here. We also used linoleum and reclaimed parquet flooring for the upper floor finishes, but left the structural slab exposed on the ground floor in order to minimise the layers in the construction. The enhanced daylighting standard that we wanted to meet through the gold standard was very easy to achieve, given that we were already going for passive house, so each room has a good balance of glazing and is very bright without a risk of overheating. This also provides us with a strong connection to the garden and the surrounding context, which is good for health and well-being. From the outset, we wanted to have a sedum roof covering to give back some biodiversity to the site area that we had built over. We only have a small 1.5 kilowatt PV array on the roof to provide some supplementary generation, but we wanted to keep this small to avoid competing with the sedum roof for coverage, and because we had an optimal orientation and a lack of shading, so it was quite efficient despite its small size. The water attenuation of the sedum is excellent and means we only need one downpipe for the whole building, which is articulated on the elevation as a recessed channel, and which then illustrates the journey of the rain before it goes through a pebble garden that you can see here, and then onto an elevated rain garden. All of the landscaping materials you can see were either salvaged or locally sourced. The bricks for the gabions were dug up during the excavations from an old vet surgery that used to exist on the neighbouring plot, and all of the stones were retained from excavations on the site, and the sandstone for the rockery came from a client's site only about 10 miles away. We didn't have any soil disposal from the project, and we didn't use a single skip, so the reuse of materials was very important to us. We've also been monitoring the dwelling's performance over the last year, and this graph gives a snapshot of the temperatures inside compared to the external temperature, which is the line at the bottom. What you can see really is a very steady pattern over time, with typically a very small range of temperature difference. The energy consumption is within a few % of the predicted, which shows the benefit of using the PHPP for this type of calculation. We've also been monitoring our hot water generation, and these graphs show the solar thermal generation in summer at the top compared to winter at the bottom, and the correlation in winter with the immersion heater on-off in green at the base of the winter graph. In terms of embodied carbon, we had a consultant undertake a whole life cycle analysis at the end of the project, and the output shows that even though we designed the house in 2013, the building is performing better than the RIBA 2030 carbon metrics for operational energy, carbon equivalent emissions, and possible water use. The high proportion of timber, both in terms of the superstructure and the insulation used throughout, has assisted massively with meeting these targets. We also designed the building fully with demountability in mind by following CEDA's guidance on designing for deconstruction so that primary component parts can hopefully be reused at the end of the building's life. This means minimising bonded or adhered layers and fixings that can be removed with minimal damage to the adjacent components. So that's us. Thanks for having us and for listening today. I'm just trying to locate my mouse so that I can stop sharing.
That's okay. Wow, no, thanks very much, Vary and Martin. That was absolutely amazing. I'm back. I can't believe that you've got like so much into your building, so much thought. I also can't believe you've got so much into 20 minutes there.
I hope that was the time, sorry.
Equally as impressive. And I didn't realize it was your first passive house project, because I'm going through my first passive house project on site myself at the moment. So I know, I know that feeling about being cautious. But now we're going to pass over to, and please everybody put in the QA. I've got a couple of questions come in, but from another source. But if please put them into the Q&A box. So please put them in there. And I'm now going to, and I thought it was great because that was a single villa, and I know I'm going to pass you over to Sonia, and she's going to just talk to you about something which is a linked villa. And I think there's a lot of interesting ground that I to talk about once Sonia's given her talks. I'm going to pass you over to Sonia Browse now, who's going to tell you about Havenfield Mews. So the floor is yours.
Hi everybody. I'm Sonia. I'm going to talk to you about Havenfield Mews. Havenfield Mews is 3 new houses that we built in a new Mews street on a site of an old church hall in Portobello. So this is Portobello, which is a suburb of Edinburgh, about 3 miles to the east of the city centre. It's known as Edinburgh's seaside, and it's a popular area known for its vibrant community. It's a walkable neighbourhood centred around the beach, which is shown here in yellow breach, and it's got a long promenade, bars and cafes, ice cream shops. And then there's a number of pocket parks and amenity spaces, as well as a vibrant high street. The high street's marked in blue on the conservation area plan in front of you. So this is some photographs of Portobello showing the beachfront there, and a crowded day like today. How busy it'd be, thriving high street, full of independent shops, and then traditional Georgian villas and Victorian housing intermixed with newer developments makes up the majority of the housing stock of the area. It's, as I say, a sustainable and mixed community. Events such as Porty Art Walk, Big Beach Busk, and the community buyout of Belfield, and the community development of the town hall, personifying the kind of community that Portobello is. The project came about due to the sale of St. James Church, which is marked an A here by the Church of Scotland. Due to falling congregation numbers, they decided to consolidate the 3 churches they had in the parish of Portobello to 1. So our client purchased St. James, which is A there, if you can see my cursor. And then Action Porty purchased B, which is Belfield Church. That was the first community right to buy in Scotland, and that's a vibrant community hub. And the church then consolidated their church activities to St. Philip's, which is marked C on the right-hand side of the plan there. So the area where our site is in the Brighton Rosefield area, to the marked in the grey here, to the south of the high street, marked in blue. That area was developed slightly later on than the initial development of Portobello, to the north of the high street. And to the north of the high street is quite a gridded arrangement, whereas to the south in Brighton Rosefield area, it's a softer arrangement with crescents, more pocket parks such as Rosefield and Brighton Parks. And all the houses were all designed by the same architect, John Baxter, mid-19th century, which gives a rhythm and regularity to the area. So you can see the typical housing of the area there. The site of the church hall, which we developed to create the new Mews housing, is in red here. In blue is the site of the church, which we also developed proposals for, which for listed building consent and planning permission, which we got for that. The site isn't actually pedestrian accessible from the high street, which is to the top. So to get to the site is quite convoluted. You need to come along Brighton Place, along Rosefield Place, drive down, if you're driving with this, drive down Rosefield Avenue, and then down the very narrow lane, which is Rosefield Avenue lane to the site, although there is a pedestrian link to the top there to the high street. So this is the church, the next door church, which is St. James Church. It's a Gothic revival church, grade B listed. It was built by G. Mackey Watson and constructed in 1910 to 1912, although buildings paused due to World War I, and then there were later additions by F.E. Blank in 1934. The style of the church is described as sort of perpendicular Gothic, which is characterized by strong vertical emphasis with the buttresses, soaring arches, vaulted ceilings, and traceried windows. Internally, it's quite simple. There's not much ornamentation other than the banding, the yellow and red sandstone banding on the arches, which again draws the eye up to the verticality of the spaces. And then this is the church hall, which from the site, it was 1970s church hall. To the back of the church, it was in poor repair and offered little architecture and also of a limited remaining lifespan. So this is a site plan as it was with the church and the church hall. So the church hall used to be accessed predominantly pedestrian with a dotted blue line along the side of the church, walking alongside the backs of all of the back gardens of the houses to Brighton Place. Whereas vehicle-wise, you'd have to go the long convoluted route that we discussed, that I think I mentioned earlier, to arrive at the church hall, and then there was just a sea of car parking really around the old church hall. Our arrangement for the new houses therefore created a new Mews off Rosefield Avenue lane there, with new frontages, continuing the frontages at the end of the lane there, and then a new back-to-back arrangement, the backs of our houses, creating a secure back-to-back between the backs of the houses on Brighton Place. So the location of our site with no through traffic gave us the opportunity to design the Mews as a place for people first. So we started looking at Mews housing in Edinburgh, such as Carlton Terrace Mews and Circus Lane, which are the two images on your screens. They're some of the most sought after and popular housing in Edinburgh, and we found that the traditional Mews creates a more intimate, friendlier type of street than those typically designed around cars. The proximity of the houses to the street and the removal of hard thresholds and boundaries created a sense of ownership between the houses and the street, and encourages the occupation of the street as an extension of the home. So as described in the diagram on the right-hand side there, the Scottish Government diagram, by providing a more informal relationship between the houses and the street, and by decreasing the segregation between the houses and the street, we sought to create a new Mews type street, which is increasingly shared and increasingly cooperative. It's a place where the neighbours can come together, where children play, which we felt was fitting the community spirit of Portobello. And so then this is then an early sketch we did of the new Mews, looking at how, when we remove hard boundaries between the houses and the street, how we could still create softer thresholds between the house and the street through soft planting and modelling of the facade. So we started looking at bringing soft planting out, pushing it out into the Mews to indicate the thresholds and private space between the homes and the street, while pushing back the entrances under the upper floor overhang. There's also a glass-to-glass corner window, which you can see on the left-hand side sketch there, which gives overlooking to the entrance, to the pushed back entrance and passive surveillance, while also giving activity and life to the Mews. When thinking about removing all of the traditional hard boundaries between houses and the street, we realized it's really important how you consider street clutter, such as bins and cars, so that they don't start to dominate the space. So bin and bike stores were integrated into the house design and used to form thresholds between the houses. So these, I don't know if you can see my pointer bit, hopefully you can. These here are large bin and bike stores. There's two for each house, which are integrated as part of the design. And then car parking, as you can see there, just set back and tucked back between the houses so that they don't dominate the Mews. And then this is then a photograph of it as it's built. So you can see there the soft planting starting to be planted, coming out and pushing out to create those soft boundaries, the modeling of the facade. So you're pushing the thresholds in, the integrated storage for bins and bikes, as well as the corner windows and the car parking pushed back. And then another photograph again showing that corner window, the car parking pushed back and the soft planting. And then just a photograph from the front, so you can see that entrance sequence there, it pushed back with the soft planting pushing through forward in the corner window. In terms of the house design, all the three houses were the same layout, same design, and the intention was to create homes with character rather than anonymous boxes, which often appear synonymous with contemporary housing developments. We sought to create characterful homes similar to the so loved traditional Georgian and Victorian homes in Edinburgh, with their high ceilings, large windows, feature cornices and traditional features, whilst also looking to create comfortable and sustainable, low maintenance contemporary housing. The homes were therefore designed with a well insulated fabric first approach with good air tightness and triple aspect, passive ventilation, good variety and quality of natural light. The homes were designed with high ceilings, high and airy ceilings, and the homes are all triple aspect, and all of the habitable rooms are also dual aspect, which gives, as well as the benefits for light and ventilation, just gives a range of quality lights and views that provide visual interest. So none of the rooms are one-dimensional boxes. Instead of cornices to give ornamentation, we used exposed redwood trusses to provide ornamentation and interest within the houses, with light washing over them from the clear story glazing. The houses were designed with a simple and efficient layout designed to suit modern family life. So in terms of the layout, I'll just talk you through it. Hopefully you can see my cursor. So you come in and the entrance there, which we talked about a minute ago, into a large hallway with a large glazed screen beside the door to allow lots of natural light in. There's good storage, and then a WC just as you come in, and then the central stair, which takes you upstairs. At the front of the house, where that corner window is a multifunctional space, really. It's a study. It's used by different homeowners in different ways. It could be a fifth double bedroom. It can be a study. It can be a snug second living room. And it's quite interesting to see the three different homeowners all use it in a different way, but it allows for flexibility, both for different homeowners, but also over the different stages of their life within the home. And then moving through to the back of the home, we've got an L-shaped open plan kitchen, dining, living space. And that's orientated in that L-shape facing south. So south is directly to the right of the screen as you're looking at it. We use the L shape to help zone the three spaces within the open plan arrangement, and then had bifolds either side of a fireplace, so that the whole of that space can be opened up, just leaving behind the fireplace, and opened up and connected to the garden. And then there's a small utility space just off the kitchen there as well, and a garage in the setback here. Upstairs, just come up that central stairway, and there's a large glazed window over the stair which draws light right down into the center and the heart of the home. And then you've got 4 good sized double bedrooms arranged around that central hallway, with a family bathroom centrally placed there also, and then an ensuite at the back there for the master bedroom. With I say all of the rooms are at least, the habitable rooms are at least double aspect. So the bedrooms have aspect front and back, but they also, the ones on this side, on the left hand side of the plan, have the clear story glazing as well, whereas the ones on the right have the front and back aspect, as well as patio doors leading onto the terrace, which has external stairs stepping down and joining, linking round to the ground floor back garden as well. So this is the ground floor plan, so you can see there the entrance, the hallway, the central stair, that flexible space to the front, and the L-shaped living, dining, kitchen space orientated to the south there. And then moving upstairs, oh no, sorry. This is just an image of one of our families that are living in the living, dining, kitchen space, and you can see there the bifold screens that can just be opened up completely to leave behind just the the fireplace, connecting the garden and the houses together. And then from the outside, you can see there again the two glazed screens and then the chimney just going up vertically in between. And then the upper floor plan, you can see the very straightforward layout, really. Central stair, hallway, giving way to 4 good-sized bedrooms, master bathroom, and ensuite, as well as the terrace that links together the houses, and staircase leading down. Just a sedum roof over the living room extension. So that's the section going through. So there you can see the feature trusses that I mentioned that give this character to the houses, with the clear story glazing, which washes light over them. So these bedrooms have that clear story, and while the bedrooms on the other side lead out onto the terrace. And then section just through the central stair and the family bathroom there. So you can see there the central stair with the screen onto the terrace, which allows light to filter right down into the center of the home, as well as what we did was we just snuck the roof down a little bit so that we could get a window into the family bathroom and natural ventilation into the family bathroom. So all the rooms are naturally lit and ventilated apart from the toilets. And then there's some images of those exposed trusses, and you can see on the right-hand side image the clear story glazing with the light washing over the trusses there. And then some other photographs of the trusses and the clear story glazing. And then an image to the back, you can see there where the clear story glazing is, as well as where we've snuck it down to get the glazing into the bathroom, and then also the bifolds with the central chimney running up through. So we sought to design the homes to complement the local context and community of Portobello. I think I mentioned at the beginning, the Brighton and Rosefield area where the houses were all designed by the same architects. The typology of the houses in the area are these large sandstone villas with setback single-story elements joining them between, which kind of linked villa typology. And so we sought to create a contemporary version of this linked villa typology in our homes. So we started playing with modeling, looking to create our homes with a setback garage, which links the houses, emulating the linked villa typology of the area. So this is, and then looking at the back, we started to think, well, maybe we could use if we have a garage and set that back, then above it, maybe we could use that to create a terrace, to create a second, more intimate amenity space between houses. And that's just a section there through the setback garage, and you can see there the patio doors leading to the bedrooms, the large window bringing light over the stair, the clear story windows, and also we've got an ensuite for the master, which we used roof lights and a wee planter just to make sure that actually there's no overlooking between the terrace and that ensuite. And then that also came together with these elevations, and you can see there the elevations showing the sort of linked villa typology with the setback elements in a yellow sandstone, and then the houses in a warmer mixed stock brick, which reflect the red sandstone of the adjacent church. The redder brick is also often found in the back lanes and sort of boundary walls of Portobello, because it comes from the production of bricks in Portobello in the potteries. I think one of the early slides I showed you the pottery kilns that are still there. And then that's the photograph of it as built. So you can see that linked villa typology, that modern interpretation of that typology. And then, as well as the surrounding housing, we were also conscious that our houses were to be built immediately adjacent to St. James Church. And we're inspired by the vertical emphasis of the Gothic perpendicular style with its buttresses, gable forms, and soaring windows. Despite being a modest two-story scaled housing, we wanted to play with the modelling of our houses, splitting up the roof forms to draw the eye up and emulate the verticality of the church. So clear story glazing fills the gap between the split form and draws the eyes up both externally and also within the houses where the light spills over the trusses in a similar way to the light given by the high windows in the church. We also started playing games such as bringing the planter that binds the two the split volumes together. That planter would bring it over, and we've got actually it's an upstairs window and a downstairs window, but by connecting over with the planter, almost starts to appear that it's a double height window within the running behind. And that's just then a photograph, and I think you can see there sort of that verticality and how it hopefully relates positively to the adjacent church. In the back, while simpler, we still wanted to emulate some of that verticality, and we were looking at the buttresses and then using that run along the back, the side of the church, continuing that line with the repeated chimneys that run along the back, and you can see that in this photograph here. So this is sketch did of the Mews right at the beginning of the project. We're thinking through all of these ideas at play as to how to best develop houses for the community in Portobello to fit in. And then this is an as-built view of the Mews taken last week when we popped down, and it was just really lovely to see the family starting to plant out the beds and planters. And from my point of view, that sort of early sketch that we did is starting to come alive there. So it's really lovely. Thank you very much. That's me. Shall I?
Yeah, please stop sharing. That'd be great. Thanks, Sonia. That was absolutely fantastic, by the way. Equally impressed that you managed to get like so much into your 20 minutes. Both absolutely brilliant projects, and unlike last week or the week before, we've actually got a little bit longer than normal to ask some questions and get into a bit of conversation, which is great, because I've got a few questions. Some of them you can see, but I've also got some others, and I'm going to kind of clump them into kind of three kind of groups, I think. So because we've got a bit of time, please feel free to expand a bit in the kind of conversation. The first one I've got is kind of quite it's kind of straightforward, and I think it comes they're both about kind of form, and both buildings are quite different. One is and I've been a passive house designer. I probably guess that form factor is probably driving it, and it's very much a cube. The other one, which I think is quite different, Sonia's building, seems to be quite, I mean, I always like tempted, I kind of love both, you know, because I'm always kind of like, I love kind of like simplicity and less is more, but I also kind of like a bit of extravagance and less is a bore and all of that kind of stuff as well. So I kind of like both, and also the way that Sonia's then, you know, obviously I can see it's to do with space and pulling things forward and getting light in. But were either of you tempted to Sonia to maybe simplify something, and Paper Igloo to maybe do something a little bit more extravagant? So I don't know who wants to go first, but how would you answer that? Sonia, you go first then. Were you ever tempted to simplify something, or were you really happy and really important to get that light in?
I think the plans and the basic arrangement is actually deceptively simple in our plans, but there's just that little bit of modeling that goes on that gives that apparent complexity to it. So I don't think they're possibly quite as complex as they maybe appear, but I also think they were all driven by quite clear, rigorous rationales in terms of light, quality of space, and creating meaningful spaces. So they all, you know, they gave that sort of dual aspect became in every room became a real critical driver, and fitting in with the context and creating a Mews that was successful. And so all of those drivers kind of led to quite clear rationale. So, and possibly I think you always reach a stage where you wish you'd simplified something, but it's usually too late. So I can't think of anything specific that I would have actually simplified.
No, that's fair enough. No, that's good. It's interesting that you say that. Actually, it's actually quite simple. But what you've done, a few moves, maybe moving things back and forward to because its space was tight and it's in the back, and you need to get natural light into all these spaces. So maybe that simple move, just that shift, has created that kind of impression of complexity. But the same question to Paper Igloo then. In that, were you at any point tempted? It's very sculptural, it's very beautiful. I love it, but I love them both projects. But were you ever tempted at any point to maybe just do something? What do you say to that?
I think no is the really short answer. Because they're very different contexts as well. So I think because we're down this backland site, we don't have a built context to really respond to. So we had more freedom in that sense, in that we could go for something much more plain and kind of, that didn't pick up on any elements of the built context that's close to us, because we've got quite a lot of vegetation between us and anything else around us. Plus there's quite a mix of stuff here of lots of different styles and so on. So I think we put our energy into obviously clearly adhering to the Passivhaus standard, because it was, that was one of our main goals. So that was a driver for the overall form. So then once we'd sort of made that decision and kind of drawn the line under, right, it's going to be a really simple cuboid. We're not going to have, we're not going to push pull on the facade and have kind of overhangs and so on. Then we were like, okay, how else can we add interest? How else can we kind of add layers and so on? So things like the miters and, but again, I suppose sticking to one material. But then how you detail that material, how you put the corners together and so on, was the way that we wanted to kind of express that. And I think internally there's probably more, complexity is the wrong word, but there are more layers of materials and ways that the materials meet that, than there are on the outside. So the outside is definitely more kind of simplified, I suppose, than the interior is.
They're very opposite in that respect, aren't they? Because you built it for you, and there's so much personality and things going on inside that we were building for potential people, and trying to be flexible in terms of the spaces we're creating while still a bit characterful. So we almost had opposing ambitions, I think, was in that regard.
Yeah, right. Definitely. Yeah, I think that's really, really quite critical actually to the way that you then, progress your design, and absolutely key to, there's just something, it's so different when you're designing for yourself and you have that kind of like, well, I like this, so I can do it like this, versus, okay, what's going to work for, for instance, for a family versus a couple versus, someone you don't know who's going to end up in that building. Whereas obviously we knew what our needs were and what we wanted to do.
Martin, do you want to say anything?
I suppose the only other thing is, we cut quite a massive chunk out of the plan with the double height space, more than a quarter of it. And as you know, the sort of Passivhaus is ratified against floor area. So the energy performance of the house shell is doing one thing, but because of the floor plate getting cut away, Barry had to work quite hard to kind of do the Passivhaus sort of calculation part to make it comply. So in a way, if we had done more to the shell that was ins and outs and things, it might have been a bit harder to actually get compliance with the criteria. And Barry had to do a lot of thermal modelling of junctions to prove there were negative psi values and all that kind of thing. So we could actually account for those in the calculation to offset this massive double height. And we chose to do that. We could add a bedroom up there or something, but we didn't want it. We wanted this drama in the corner. And because of that, I think, in a way, retrospectively, having a simpler form helped us to get where we wanted to be. And we've learned on other houses not to do such a massive double height. Basically, it's the moral.
Well, I think it comes back to that designing for other people thing. We could kind of afford that extravagance in the energy balance, if you like. So not financially afford it, but kind of in terms of sort of working out the numbers to make Passivhaus compliance. But in other projects where clients are more, kind of specific in their spatial needs and so on, then obviously we don't give over such an amount of floor area to a big empty void, because so we tend to design pitched roof, more kind of with the kind of forms that are more kind of what's the word, like
normal, and just more kind of
well, or just sort of
more akin to the other housing stock, I suppose.
Yeah.
They're both brilliant. And I can love that. And I know that Sonia took so much from the vertical height, and that was great to see. I'm going to get the next questions, and we do slightly more to do with rigor of construction. And we do have a couple of, I'm going to catch a couple of questions that we do have in the box. And I'm going to put the first one to Paper Igloo, because I know they'll know their airtightness result. But I don't know if you know yours, Sonia, but I don't even know if you did actually do an airtightness test on your building, but you did. Oh, well, that's going to be fast. But I'll start with Paper Igloo.
I don't know if I can find it on the spot right now, but I did, because I remember it was quite a traumatic day to find out whether we got it or not. But we did. We got it. But I don't. I'll have a look.
Oh, don't worry about it. But I mean, I know that you're probably going to be 0.6 or less. I don't know what was your airtightness result then?
Final result was 0.2. So
wow,
yeah, we did slightly better on the intermediate test. We were at 0.18 on the intermediate test, and then by the time we were done at the end, it was like 0.19 something. So rounded to 0.2. Yeah.
Well, that's incredibly good. I mean, for those who don't, I mean, usually with pacifiers, there's an intermediate test before you start to puncture the airtightness membrane, putting basically flues and everything. Sonia, don't worry. I can see you searching through you found it.
Got it. Not as good, obviously. 5.03.
No, that's great. No, thank you very much. That's way better than the building standards and things like this. But obviously it's really crucial. But the rigor of construction is again quite kind of important. Now, that was Sally who asked the question about airtightness, but Gary's asked that question. Now I know, how did you communicate these design ideas to the contractors? I'll be interested to know what Sonia has to say. But you were the contractors.
In the most part, yeah. So, but because this was the first passive house we'd done, we were kind of cutting our teeth on things like making an airtight building. We hadn't done that part before, but we had done some construction ourselves before. So I think that is quite important. Like, this wasn't the first thing we'd ever built, but like ourselves, but it was the first airtight building we'd done. So there was a bit of a learning curve. But since then, we've obviously done a lot more passive houses, and that's, we do that for clients and so on. So we do have that kind of experience of explaining to contractors how to achieve that and so on. And actually, the contractor we work with most frequently had never done a passive house or an airtight building before he'd worked with us. He hadn't used natural insulation before he'd worked with us and so on. So we've kind of, to an extent, gone on that journey together, or we've sort of taken him with us, I suppose. And so there is definitely some, we do some toolbox talks. We make sure that we speak to the plumbing contractor and the electrician and so on before they start the first fixing, so that we just go over the importance of the airtight layer, what that means. But there's generally trying to foster a culture, I suppose, of there are no mistakes really that are irreparable as long as they're reported early enough. So basically catching everything before plasterboard goes on. So that's why you do your intermediate test, as you've said, so that you're kind of, you reach a point in the project where you're like, okay, we're comfortable, we're as airtight as we need to be. We can now start to kind of cover over, and we'll get to the end and we'll still be okay. So yeah, there's definitely some onboarding, but I think because we're working at the smaller end of the scale, that's been less difficult, because we have a lot more one-on-one with the people who are actually doing the work as well, and so there's not sort of that removal between their boss and then actually the guy doing the work. So, we do get to kind of chat quite a lot with the people who are actually on site doing stuff.
Yeah, I know this from myself this time, because I don't know if you had an airtightness champion, but I know that that's something that was that you, Martin? Or who was your airtightness?
Yeah.
But I know that I'm on site at the moment, and we've had to do an induction to our contractor, and just to go through how you tape, what you do, all the kind of pros and cons of going through a kind of a passive house project. And we have to appoint an airtightness champion. So the contractor's been great about it, but it actually seems to end up like a really collaborative process now with the contractor, almost because we're kind of like working so hand in glove, and quality control. So it's such a big thing with passive house. Sonia, with your project, it's again, I mean, I'd have thought that's a really tight looking site, and the quality of build is actually really, really high. So how did you, and the materials are really carefully selected and carefully used. How did you work with your contractor on such a tight site with and manage to create something of such high quality?
The materials and detailing were relatively robust, standard detailing. We didn't try to create awkward detailing, so there isn't that many funny junctions in a way. They're all very much your normative junctions. The way we managed the type site was that we had ownership of the church at the time, so we were using that as site offices. We used that as the workshop to make the trusses in, and we used the access from the church, so we wouldn't be driving vehicles around the narrow roads to the site. In terms of working collaboratively with them, they were really great builders, but unfortunately they went into liquidation halfway through the project. So we worked very closely. We basically kept the guys as much as possible, the trades on site, and myself and the client were there, or ordering materials and managing the works on site. And so we ended up, I live around the corner, so I was there most days with the guys, sometimes twice a day. And so, yeah, very, very, close relationship. And similar to what Mary just described, just that sort of team effort of working together and finding a way through. It was a bit of a difficult time for quite a few people, but we all kind of went, no, we're going to finish this, and we're going to finish it well, and we did. So yeah, it's nice to be able to look back on that now.
Yeah, I didn't know that. I mean, that's incredible. Then you've managed to achieve that. I don't know how far on your project was when that has happened twice to me before, and it's really catastrophic. People have no idea how catastrophic it is if a contractor goes into liquidation. One, we had the roof on, and that was okay. It was a bit more work. One, we did not have the roof on, and already the building just starts deteriorating immediately.
We had the roof on, so in a way we were quite lucky that we could. I think had it happened earlier, you would almost need to have taken on a whole new contractor, which I'm not sure would have been viable. But because of the stage, we kind of went, well, we can finish this. And it took a bit longer, and we all muddled through and brought it all together. Yeah.
I think that's absolutely brilliant, because it's good that you spoke highly of the contractor. We won't ask who it is, but highly of the contractor who went into liquidation, because that's not always the case. That people will speak highly of the contractor that goes into liquidation, because it sounds like they built something of quality and were able to.
No, they weren't. They didn't want to go. They didn't want to go bust. They didn't go bust specifically because of our project, but they couldn't. They took on too many things, and I was speaking to him every day up until then. So they become like your best mate, and then suddenly actually it gets cut off, and you can't, because they got told by their lawyers to cut their phones completely. And it's really quite weird. It's like being dumped, even though you haven't chosen to be in a relationship. So yeah, no, they were good guys, and they didn't mean to. They didn't want that. Nobody wanted that, and so I think it's a bit mean when people talk badly of something. It's obviously a horrible situation, and it's easy to be angry. But I don't. They were good guys, and they tried their best, and they built well, and we finished it off.
Did you manage to keep the same subcontractors on? And I realize this has turned into.
We kept the trades and employed them directly, and kept the subcontractors on, transferred the accounts across as much as we possibly could, that kind of thing. So yeah,
that's brilliant. And how about yourself, Barry and Martin? How was that, like organizing different trades? And you were basically project managing that project then? I know you were building some of it, but you must be bringing in trades at different times and organizing them and programming them. Was that quite difficult?
Yeah, I mean, yeah, it's always difficult trying to make people come at certain times and do things, but I think the biggest juggling was actually doing it all while we were working simultaneously. So it was kind of doing a project manager role, plus trying to work, plus trying to do bits of it.
Yeah, because we didn't actually have that many contractors, and they were because we took quite a long time to build it, because we were doing it in our free time and so on. We actually could, I would say the scheduling of other people was probably less difficult than just scheduling ourselves, if you see what I mean. So just, you know, because we were obviously also doing doing drawings and material takeoffs, you know, working out what we needed and when, and coordinating all of that to minimize wastage, but so we could afford it, and minimizing deliveries. And, you know, so it was just all the logistics of the day-to-day, I suppose, but then coupled with running our business. That was probably the sort of, we had some stress points, you know, because of that. So for instance, when we stayed in a caravan for 9 months over winter next to the house, that was pretty unpleasant. Like trying to run our company from a 2-berth caravan and live and build the house. So, you know, that was a bit of a low, but yeah, other than that, it sort of got better. And yeah,
it's good you can laugh about that now, but that's
we're still married, so, you know, it's like, yeah.
So okay, and then I've got a question here. It's to do with and kind of like, again, it's a strange question to put to you, but it's to do with it's like a POE question that's come in, and it's to do with the kind of like I'm getting questions from another source as well, by the way, if you're wondering, and it's like to do with the kind of reaction to your project, because I think it was really the both in oh, I've got another one in here as well in the chat bar maybe. But what I've got is they're both in quite sensitive areas. I mean, you're on the edge of a conservation area, Barry and Martin, and so I think it's probably you're right in the middle of a conservation area. So what has been the reaction? The question is, what has been the reaction to your buildings from the communities? I know that I'm thinking more of the wider community than necessarily the people that are in the building, because I know that, Sonia, you said you just recently visited, and it's really lovely seeing the families kind of inhabit the building. And I was really fascinated as well, just if you were able to say something about the way that I thought it was the way that the 3 churches and the way that the community had found different uses for the 3 churches, because I know that churches are congregations are petering out, and that's a big thing. So I'd be really interested to know what you think about the wider community, and it'll be the same question to yourself and Barry and Martin as well, because I know you're going to love your own house, I guess. But I'd be interested to know what the community think about it. But you first then, Sonia. How's the community reacted to your project?
They've been really, really positive, actually. That's the thing about Portobello. It is a conservation area, but it is a really enthusiastic, vibrant community that sort of embraces change. As long as people it's not being imposed on them from high, and as long as they feel that it benefits them. We had a number of, we didn't need to, but we sort of did consultation events in the church and in the hall prior to starting, where we invited everyone round and chatted through. So it was very much known. And then we had a group of neighbours that we collected from all the adjacent streets, and we'd meet up every month to make sure that to show them round, keep them updated, but also just to make sure that there was no issues with our works affecting them that we wouldn't be aware of, that might be rumbling on the background. So that was really successful. But yeah, the community seemed really, really supportive of it. I went down last time I went down before, and there's a dance school that's on that little lane as well, children's dance school, and we went in, all the kids were dancing in the streets, and it was just really lovely. So they're kind of taking it on, and I know also from the building that they used to practice all their dancing with the windows open. All the builders would be singing along to Aladdin as well, so it's kind of that kind of thing. But it was really nice to go back recently, just because I guess because the builder went into liquidation. Probably the last thing and my biggest regret was we didn't get the plants in. So and just being able to get back and actually see them, it looked a bit austere compared to how I'd envisaged it. And that's, I think, what I said that at the end, to go back this week and just take some more photographs and see those plants, the planting of the planters and the soft boundaries coming through, because it was such an important part of sort of the vision for it. It was really, really nice. But yeah, no, it seems to be being really appreciated and supported in Portobello.
That's great. No, thanks very much. And same question to Martin and Barry. How's the community reacted to your building?
Yeah, I think generally positive. I mean, there's no getting away from the fact it is a timber cube and it's not for everyone, and that's fair enough. But I think generally it's kind of,
Yeah,
you know,
I would say like locally, it's been really well received, and most people are, I mean, people are quite curious about it as well. We quite often get somebody sort of randomly wandering down our drive, or the odd time we've found people sort of round in the garden, you know, because there's no gate and stuff. So so that's fine, you know, you have a chat, and so I think it's sparked a bit of curiosity, but I think, yeah, on the whole in the village, it's been really positively received. Yeah, I mean, like Martin says, social media wise, it's a bit Marmite, but that's fine. We're fine with that. You know.
And some more questions have started coming in, which you'll start to see. I think there's questions in the chat bar and questions in the Q&A, so I'll kind of bring them together. But one from Peter and one from Leslie. I think there's two questions in there, Leslie, and that has to do with like cost. So I mean, the first one's for yourself. I think PI must be paper Igloo. I mean, do you have an idea of how much that cost you? Because I suppose it was a self-build, so
yeah, it's a bit skewed. So our construction cost was about 250,000, but obviously for what we've built, that's very low. But that's because that doesn't take into account our labour input. So, you know, when we were doing the open days for the Passivhaus Trust a few years, we've had some builders obviously looking at the house and so on, and a couple of people have said to us, oh, you could probably add another, you know, couple of $100,000 onto that to get a third party to build it all for you. It's a really difficult question. I think things like the diagonal timber cladding, you know, I can't stress enough how much extra time that added. Like really, you know, cutting compound miters like in reverse and all that kind of stuff, and then the fitting of all of that together. So that certainly, it was a very expensive detail, but which obviously has, in terms of if you were to get someone to build it for you, but which obviously has no bearing at all on the passive house. So that's a question we get asked quite a lot, is sort of, you know, what was the cost to build with, and I think at the back of people's minds, they're thinking, oh, because it was Passivhaus certified, that means it'll be expensive. But actually the expensive things we did were the architectural things, if you see what I mean, that were nothing to do with the performance really. Because you just, you know, the money that we would have spent on, say, a bigger heating system for this size of house has just gone into more insulation. So so yeah, it's hard to give a really accurate cost per square meter. And also because we went over such a long period of time, you know, from 2013, 2014 up to 2020, that would have changed quite significantly over that time, you know, if we'd done the whole project in 9 to 12 months. So it's a very hard question to answer really accurately or meaningfully for this particular build.
That's okay. No, thanks for that. And I don't know, Sonia, it was a quick, because again, it was a difficult circumstance. So I don't know how you can, you know, with how is it possible? Yeah, there's another question for you as well, Sonia, which is, what are the future plans for the church itself? So, but I mean,
well, in terms of the construction costs, the original contract value was £1 million, and it's 3 200 square meter houses. So the price per square meter was about 1,700, which is, it wasn't quite a while ago as well. So that's on the low scale. And that's because it actually is deceptively simple in many regards. It was probably a little bit too low, but yeah, I think there's been a bit of conjecture as to why they went bust, and the fact that people said that it's not repeatable. It is, if you want to make any profit, you can't, that rate's far too low. And also, you know, nowadays we're talking probably 5 years since it started, you know, material costs and inflation means that rate is completely, you know, if you think about that rate nowadays, it feels crazy, but it wasn't so far off. It was a little bit too low, probably, one would suggest, but it's not unrepeatable entirely. I don't believe.
No, I don't think it's unrepeatable. I think it's great. What the Bob of the church, we've got a wee question that's in there. So I think you've said before, but it's going to.
We got listed building consent and planning permission to convert the house into 4 homes, because there's 4 existing doors on the 4 corners, and then we could create 4 homes with each with their own front door, and gardens. But sadly, well, because the contractor went bust, that led to a lot of pressure on the client, essentially, and so he had to sell it with the permission. It's being developed, and they're now doing 5 homes. It's got a new architect, and they're doing 5 homes. So it's a bit bittersweet because I kind of dreamt everything inside that building. So it's always, it's a bit, yeah, but I also think it's great that it's being developed, and I'm sure it'll be great. It's hard to unimagine what you've previously imagined in that regard.
No, I think it is great because, I mean, a lot of these churches just end up empty. Do you know what I mean? So so it's really good that something's happening. And our last question from Gary. He says it's a classic, but it is a classic question. And I'm going to but here goes in Gary's own words. What one thing would you do differently? And I'll start with paper Igloo, and you can't say the diagonal cladding. You're not allowed to say that, even though I think Martin might. So what would be the one thing you might do differently?
Well, that is a very hard question, and I don't want to sound like a total cop-out, but I actually don't know that. I think also because we took so long, I think if I was designing a house for us now, I would obviously do things differently. But like at basic level, now we have 2 little cats, and so I'd maybe think about like things to do with them, and maybe a bigger utility room, and sort of silly stuff. But because your lifestyle is different and your kind of needs are a bit different, but I think it would just be different rather than. I don't have any regrets, I suppose is what I'm trying to say about how we designed it. So there's nothing I sit and think, oh, I wish I'd not done that. Or
yeah, I mean, technologies have moved on even since then quite
Yeah.
dramatically as well. So I mean, battery storage, I would have some battery storage,
Yeah.
bigger PV array,
but I mean,
things like that, but nothing overly dramatic, I don't think.
No. And I just sort of feel
An
like,
irrigation system for the sedum roofs, so I don't have to go in there and water it myself. Things like that, sort of
but that's not.
inconvenience-based thing rather than.
I think there's nothing fundamental, is what we're trying to say.
No, that's okay. No, it's anyway. I can appreciate your answer. Would you have said the diagonal boarding if you'd actually taken that out of your list?
Said that. I wouldn't, but I just did the nailing. Martin did all the
halfway
cutting.
through when it was half done and I couldn't really be bothered anymore and it was raining and you're up scaffolding, I probably would have said that, but now it's all like a memory, a distant memory, nightmare, whatever you want to call it. I appreciate it now, so I'll say no to that actually. And
Sonia, what about yourself? And I realise your building's deceptively simple, by the way. And I realise, but my first question or discussion point, I totally get. So, but what if there was anything that you might do differently? What would you do?
It's a really hard, for a simple question. It is a really hard question. So apologies if I don't fully. I'm not sure, and I also I'm not actually sure I would do anything differently because I think we were always quite clear what we were doing and why and where that came from. And what the objectives were. There were very definitely compromises that happened along the way, but they were pretty minor. I think the thing I regret is that the builder went bust and it was so difficult for him and for the client. I quite enjoyed the process of being on site constantly and getting it done, albeit it was very stressful. It was very difficult for those people, and so I probably regret not, that it was such a hard process and that they couldn't leave the process feeling proud of it, and knowing that
Are they being back to have a look at it, the builder?
I don't know if the builder has. No, because he just cut his phone, so we're not allowed to speak. That's something the trades guys have. I think the client found it very distressing, and I'd like him to know that he's done something great.
No, well, hopefully he's watching. But of course, 2 absolutely fabulous projects, and that's 6:45. So I'm going to have to round it off. But they are absolutely brilliant, and it was a really nice conversation. I really enjoyed it. I really like the fact you were actually speaking to each other, and I didn't. I could have gone. I was cut out the conversation. I was like, oh, hang on. But it was really great listening to you, and I suppose that's right. That's the way it should be. That you should be speaking to each other. But that was absolutely brilliant. 2 fantastic projects. Love them both. Thank you both very much. Next week it's going to be workplace, and it'll be Tamsy who will be hosting that. And we're going to have a Lockerbie Sawmill from Kieran and Gaffney, and also Quarry Studios by Moxon. So that will be just as equally as interesting. But I don't know how you do this, but thank you so much, Sonia, Martin, and Vary. Thank you very much. That was absolutely brilliant. Thank you.
No problem. Thank
Thanks
you.
very much.
Thank you.
Right, cheerio, everybody. Bye.